In this video we will animate a walk cycle of this robot from scratch, make it a perfect looping animation with a cool trick and make the robot walk along a path. And did I mention this cool stop motion effect? Hi everyone, Reinhardt here for cgboost.com and let's get started. First, for everyone that don't want to watch a long video, here's the most important part of this tutorial in less than a minute. To create a perfect looping walk cycle, bring your